So today we're going to make a monument to a heroic die. A die that might have rolled well to save your heroes. A die that might have killed the villain. A die that rolled well in a clutch situation. So we're going to make a heroic die monument, one that shows the beauty of the die. You may have seen my previous video on making a die monument. That was a dastardly die monument. And I used insulation foam, and I also said you could use the Dollar Tree foam board for the base of your monument. This one I actually used floral foam, and I thought that'd be fun for you guys to check out and see. It's a really cool material to work with. You can actually sculpt it with your hands. It's a little bit more delicate, obviously, than insulation foam or Dollar Tree foam boards. So you don't want to have it in a situation where it can be handled directly by your players or yourself, but it's perfect inside something like this, inside a case. So let's get started. So this is a little bit bigger than your average chess X box, which gives us a little bit more room for scenery in there. But you can also just use a chess X box. And I'll leave a link below for these. And also you can find all the supplies and tools that I use in these videos at gamegearmaster.com. And we're going to start by using the glass enclosure from the die box to mark off how big a piece of floral foam we're going to need. And we're just going to carefully cut that out with a utility knife and just kind of chip it off. And you know, it might be a little bit irregular, but that's okay. We kind of want it to not be a perfect square. And you're going to want to trim off a little bit of that foam just so it fits comfortably in that box. And we're going to want to put some masking tape on to cover up that connection point between the cover and the base, because getting floral foam in there, it's a nightmare to get out again. And once you have all your masking tape on there, we're going to hot glue the floral foam onto the base. Now you want to give it a little bit of time before you put the floral foam directly on this hot glue. You want to have that hot glue cool off a little bit. Now I cut that time out of here in the interest of not wasting your time. But you want to make sure that it's not smoking like it was there when you put the floral foam on. Just give it like 10 seconds before you put the foam on and it should be fine. And then once it's on there, then the fun begins. Just use your fingers to mold it into whatever shape you want. Just keep in mind, you're going to want to keep a flat spot in the middle and the top of the piece, because that's where we're going to put our die. So you can use your fingers with this. You can use your utility knife if you want more angular edges. I went with something that's kind of smooth and sloping here, but it's really up to you. It's a lot of fun. It's really very fast gratification. And once we're done with this step, we're going to take a brush to brush off some of that dust from the floral foam. And once that's done, I took here, this is a piece of tubing that I had because I wanted to raise the die off of the ground and make it look like it was sitting on the top of a tree stump. You can use a piece of a pencil. You could kind of cut off. You could use like a big pen shaft. You don't even have to use this. You could just literally put the die directly on the ground. Here I'm measuring out the height of that tree stump because I want to make sure that wherever I put it, there's enough room to have the die clear the top of the glass enclosure. Once that's on there, I'm going to paint the entire thing with this paint glue mixture. Now this is a 50-50 mix of PVA glue or Elmer's glue and paint. In this case, I'm not watering it down because I want it to be full strength, because this is going to contribute a lot of durability and hardness to the foam. It basically makes a shell of glue on the outside of the foam. It actually makes it relatively durable considering it is floral foam. Now, after I painted this on there, I realized, hey, you know what? I should probably put like some sort of root structure or make that cylinder look a little less like a cylinder and more like a tree stump. So I added some hot glue on there to simulate roots and have it be more interesting looking than just a cylinder. And then I added some paint to it to cover up the hot glue. And now here I'm just dry brushing on some tan paint to kind of give that dirt layer a little bit more definition and depth. If you're not familiar with dry brushing, you basically just put a small amount of paint on your brush and you stroke most of it off, and then you just gently brush it across the surface. And you can do as much or as little of this as you want. I went pretty heavy with this, and you notice here I got a blotch on it. Easy enough to fix, just keep brushing over it. And now I put a lot on here because I wanted to really lighten this one up, because this is a heroic monument, so I wanted to be happy, bright, and look a little pretty. And once this is done, we're going to start painting the top. I took some olive green paint here, and I'm going to use that paint not only to simulate grass, but also to be the first layer of adhesion for some green flock. And this flock you can get, I'll leave a link below in the description, or you can go to gamegearmaster.com and get it as well. It's relatively inexpensive, and I bought a box of this stuff years ago, and I'm still using the same box. So after I put this flocking on, just to make sure it sticks on there really well, I'm also going to use an eyedropper to put on a 50-50 mixture of water and PVA glue. And this water PVA glue mixture also has a little bit of dishwashing liquid in it to break the surface tension. And you'll notice that the happy accident of doing this is that some of this glue drips down the sides of our model. And we're going to use that to our advantage because we're going to use those little drips to simulate vines in a second here. Now, if you don't have an eyedropper, you can use the head of a pin. You can use actually even the end of a pencil even. For a good example of this and how it works in action, you can check out my cheap mini makeover of a toy spider. I use a pick that I had at my table instead of an eyedropper because I couldn't find it. So here I am sprinkling on some ground cover on the sides where the glue dripped down. And it kind of gives a cool effect. It sort of looks like there's little vines hanging down from the sides. Now I found these little rocks, but you can use any rocks that you find. But I used these because I thought they looked nice. And I'm going to put them on there for an additional accent. Now here's the great thing about that floral foam. I can just kind of push them into the floral foam and it'll break through that paint glue seal that we made. And it'll just stick right on there. Here I'm using some yellow flocking. I also put a link to that in the description and on GameGearMaster.com to simulate wildflowers growing around the rocks. Pretty simple and a nice little accent. Here I got a lot of excess glue. That's no problem. Just cover it up with some wildflowers. There are no accidents. Sometimes the best accents and little details come out of making a mistake. And turning those mistakes to your advantage always feels great. And just adding some more rocks. You can add as many or as few as you'd like. Just make sure that they don't interfere with your ability to put the glass top back on. All right, that's looking pretty good. So now we're onto our die. I'm going to temporarily hot glue it onto this stand here. Now this wooden stand is just made from a couple pieces of scrap wood that I had in my garage that I hot glued together. Now I like to make my die look as good as it can, so I am going to paint it in gold. So this is just some cheap craft paint, and I'll leave some links to some cheap craft paint for you in the description below and also on GameGearMaster.com. And I'm going to want to make sure this gets completely covered, and it may take a few coats. I think this took 2 coats. And you can see I've even dabbed it on there, and it dries pretty well. You won't get those blotches on there by the time it's dried. And here I'm going to add some black wash. This is the 10-to-1 mixture of black acrylic paint to water roughly. And I'm going to use that to make the numbers on the die stick out a little bit more and really just sort of get a good accent on them. And you may find that you need to do this more than once. I think I did it twice just to get the numbers dark enough for my tastes. And once that's dry, just pry the die off of your stand. And you'll notice that probably on the bottom there'll be some residue from your hot glue. Don't even worry about that. That actually just adds more texture to the final piece. And now we're going to hot glue it onto our tree stump. Make sure it's centered on there and stuck on there pretty good. Now we're going to hide those little glue bits down there with some brown paint. And it'll just look like it's part of the tree stump. I'm also going to use this paint to simulate some vines growing up the side of the die, and I think that looks really cool. It looks like it's kind of lived there for a little while, and it's part of the display. I'm going to use a very thin brush, and I'll leave links to all my brushes too. You may need to add some water to the paint just to get it to run a little bit so it goes on smooth. Here I am testing that, and sure enough, yeah, it looks like it's going pretty good. If it doesn't sort of make a smooth line like that, then your paint is too thick, and you're going to want to add a little bit of water to it. So I'm just starting from the tree trunk and working my way up, and you can basically make any design you want. Just sort of think of branches on a tree. And once I painted these in, I'm going to use more flocking to simulate leaves on these vines. And I'm just going to use the natural stickiness of the paint to make it adhere to the die. And then it's just a matter of taking off the masking tape because we're done painting now. And I'm going to do an optional extra step here. I'll include links in the description below to these trees and also to some more economical alternatives in the description below and also on GameGearMaster.com. So here I am putting a little glue on the end, and I'm using a toothpick to not only make a hole into that floral foam, but also to mark where it is so I don't have to hunt around for it when I'm trying to set that tree in place. Sometimes you're going to want to add a little bit of glue to these trees to where they actually stick into the foam. That's always a good idea because there may be a little bit of a gap between the tree and the actual hole itself. And I just figured I'd show you, you can put a really tiny one on there too. It's pretty cool. It adds a lot, and it's not that hard to do. Just, again, we're going to use that toothpick trick. So now you can see that the trees are hanging out over the edge of our monument and they won't fit in the box. So we need to trim off the excess. You can just kind of eyeball this. Just make sure you're using a good pair of sharp scissors. And once that's done, we just put the cover back on our dice case. And you got yourself a heroic die monument. Please like and subscribe and hit that bell icon to be notified of new videos. As my thank you for your support, I've also put some free downloads for you at GameGearMaster.com, including a free PDF that lays out the details on the different Terraino building blocks. And I'll be posting more free stuff there, as well as Game Gear, D&D adventures, and other stuff you can buy to support these free videos. So thanks again.